lecture on the book of Ruth. Today we will continue with chapters 3 and 4. Read chapter 3, verse 1. One day, Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you, where you will be well provided for?" Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Ruth, "My daughter, should I not try to find a home for you, where you will be well provided for?" Naomi was thankful that her daughter-in-law followed her to Israel with faith. That is why she wanted Ruth to live God. Also, if it was God's will, she wanted Ruth to get married and live a blessed life. Verses 2 to 5. Is not Boaz, with whose servant girls you have been, a kinsman of ours? Tonight he will be winnowing barley on the threshing floor. Wash and perfume yourself, and put on your best clothes. Then go down to the threshing floor, but don't let him know you are there until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he is lying. Then go and uncover his feet and lie down. He will tell you, "I will do whatever you say," Ruth answered. It was a custom of Israel for all people to enjoy a feast when the owner finished winnowing barley on the threshing floor. It was tradition that when the feast was over, the owner sent the people away, and he slept by the harvest to guard his harvest. Boaz would follow this tradition and fall asleep after the feast was over. Naomi ordered Ruth to lie down and sleep at Boaz's feet. Naomi chose this method so that Ruth would marry Boaz. Naomi wanted Ruth to marry Boaz because Boaz was the man was responsible for continuing the business of Naomi's household. Because Boaz was a kinsman of Elimelech, he was one of many who was responsible for carrying out the family business. There are two meanings to carrying out a family business. One is to buy a house or field of a relative and return it to that relative. If a relative died without a child, the kinsman redeemer was to take the widow as his wife and continue the family line of the dead relative by naming the firstborn after his relative. That is why Naomi did not allow Ruth to marry any who had a lawful duty to continue the family line. Still, there might be one problem here. Though Naomi's thoughts and motive were good, the method was unbiblical. It was a wrong method. We must not only have a biblical motive and purpose, but should also carry it out in good ways. Yet what method did Naomi choose? She chose the method where a woman would sneak into the bed of a man to sleep with him and make him choose her as his wife. This was an unlawful and incorrect method. This was similar to Rebekah's method in teaching Jacob to deceive his father. Rebekah taught Jacob, her younger son, to deceive his father and receive the blessing of the firstborn. Her faith and aim to make her younger son receive the blessing of the firstborn was good, but it was wrong for them to deceive Jacob. Likewise, Naomi used a wrong method. We could say that this method was humanistic. Verses 6 and 7. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. When Boaz had finished eating and drinking and was in good spirits, he went over to lie down at the far end of the grain pile, approached quietly, uncovered his feet, and lay down. Here, because Ruth was unaware of the truth of the Bible and Israel's customs, she did as Naomi, who was the teacher of faith, told her to do. Ruth went and carefully lied down with Boaz, who was sleeping at the far end of the grain pile. It was not beneficial for young Ruth to marry Boaz from her point of view in both a physical and humanistic sense. In verse 10, Boaz called her my daughter and said, "You have not run after the younger men," which shows that he was much older then. Thus, it was physically not good for young Ruth to marry an old man like Boaz. She could have married a younger man, but she obeyed Naomi, her mother-in-law. Ruth's decision to marry Boaz in obedience to her mother-in-law was the result of her faith. Ruth had earnest faith to be a part of the tribe of Judah because she heard that Christ would come from the tribe of Judah. Thus, Ruth obeyed Naomi. Boaz was the seventh descendant of Judah, the son of the prostitute Rahab and Salmon. Ruth wanted to be a part of the tribe of Judah because she believed Christ from the tribe of Judah. Verses 8 to 10. In the middle of the night, something startled the man, and he turned and discovered a woman lying at his feet. "Who are you?" he asked. "I am your servant Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a kinsman redeemer." "The Lord bless you, my daughter," he replied. "This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor." When Boaz was asleep, he felt a presence and turned to look. He was then surprised that Ruth was in bed with him. At that moment he did not knock Ruth, but blessed her, saying, "The Lord bless you, my daughter." Then he complimented her because she did not run after younger men, and she served her mother-in-law with faith. Ruth did not chase after young men or wealth. Ruth wanted to marry by faith. She had faith not to marry anyone according to her desires, but by the will of God. Nowadays, young men and women make wealth and desires the standard of marriage instead of faith. But we can learn what marriage of true faith is through Ruth. We must not marry out of desire, but by the will of God, please him. Verse 11. "And now, my daughter, don't be afraid. I will do for you all you ask. All my fellow townsmen know that you are a woman of noble character." Here, Boaz did not rebuke Ruth, but comforted her by saying that every fellow townsman knew that she was a woman of noble character. Boaz could have seriously rebuked Ruth because her method was wrong in the eyes of God. Yet instead, he comforted her because he acknowledged that she was not familiar with the customs of Israel. Also, Boaz had good faith. He could have slept with Ruth because he drunk, but he did not get carried away, but kept his faith, which showed reverent faith before God. Verses 12 to 13. Although it is true that I am near of kin, there is a kinsman redeemer nearer than I. Stay here for the night, and in the morning, if he wants to redeem, good, let him redeem. But if he is not willing, as surely as the Lord lives, I will do it. Lie here until morning. Even though Boaz was truly near of kin, there was a kinsman redeemer nearer than him, and he was to give priority to the nearer person. If the kinsman redeemer nearer redeem, Boaz would let him. But if he did not want to, Boaz swore before God that he would do it. We know that Boaz admired this young woman, Ruth. However, he did not act according to his desires, but by the order that God established. Verses 14 to 15. So she lay at his feet until morning, but got up before anyone could be recognized. And he said, "Don't let it be known that a woman came to the threshing floor." He also said, "Bring me the shawl you are wearing and hold it out." When she did so, he poured into it 6 measures of barley and put it on her. Then went down. He then sent Ruth away to her house in the morning when no one could be recognized. If someone saw her come out of the house of Boaz, people would mistakenly think that he and Ruth had slept together, and it would have caused a scandal. That is why Boaz acted wisely with faith. We all need this kind of wisdom as we live with faith. We must be moral and be careful not to let there be any misunderstandings. Verses 16 to 18. When Ruth came to her mother-in-law, Naomi asked, "How did it go, my daughter?" Then she told her Boaz done for her and added, "He gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying, 'Don't go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed.'" Then Naomi said, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens, for the man will not rest until the matter is settled today." When Ruth returned home and explained the situation to her mother-in-law, Naomi replied, "Wait, my daughter, until you find out what happens." Sometimes we must act quickly to do God's works, but sometimes we must wait patiently for God's will. Some people do not know how to wait for God's time, and messages they act according to their desires. Read chapter 4, verse 1. Meanwhile, Boaz went up to the town gate and sat there. When the kinsman redeemer he had mentioned came along, Boaz said, "Come over here, my friend, and sit down." So he went over and sat down. It says that Boaz went up to the town gate. In those times, the town gate was a place where judges dealt with important cases. Boaz went up to the town gate. This was to publicly deal with the issue before others as witnesses. Then, at that time, the kinsman redeemer of Naomi, Boaz called him and invited him to participate in the meeting. Verses 2 to 4. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, "Sit here," and they did so. Then he said to the kinsman redeemer, "Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy it in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know. For no one has the right to do it except you, and I will redeem it," he said. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town to solve this issue and started a conversation with the kinsman redeemer. This method was a very effective way to settle an issue. First, Boaz wanted to settle it with fairness. Then he invited people to be witnesses so that the kinsman redeemer would not blame him later on. Here it says Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our brother Elimelech. Boaz meant, in order for you to redeem the inheritance of Elimelech, you must buy and return the land that Naomi's sold. So what will you do? Then the kinsman redeemer said that he would redeem it. Verse 5. Then Boaz said, on the day you buy the land from Naomi and from Ruth the Moabitess, you acquire the dead man's widow in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. Then Boaz informed the kinsman redeemer of two facts. First, he needed to buy the land that Naomi sold, and second, he needed to take Ruth the Moabitess to continue the family line. Verse 6. At this, the kinsman redeemer said, then I cannot redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You cannot do it. After the kinsman redeemer heard the first fact, he said that he would redeem Naomi's land. Yet after he realized that he had to marry Ruth and name her firstborn after her dead husband, he refused to fulfill his duty because he was afraid that his estate might be endangered. Verses 7 and 8. Now, in earlier times, in Israel, for the redemption and transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the kinsman redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself. And he moved. By law, if a kinsman redeemer did not fulfill his duty, he was to take off his sandal and give it to the other party as a sign. The kinsman redeemer took off his sandal and gave it to Boaz. This is an embarrassment because it was a sign that he would not fulfill his duty or help his brother. However, this nameless kinsman redeemer did it to avoid endangering his estate. Verses 9 and 10. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, today you are witnesses that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Mahlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabitess, Mahlon's wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from the town records. Today you are witnesses. In these verses, Boaz said that he would fulfill his duties unlike the kinsman redeemer nearer than him. Then he promised that he would restore all the land that the family of Elimelech sold when they went to Moab. Moreover, he said that the firstborn he acquired after he took Ruth as his wife would be named after Mahlon, the dead husband of Ruth. He then said that all the property would be named Mahlon's. There were many financial sacrifices and difficulties Boaz would encounter if he wanted to fulfill his responsibilities as the kinsman redeemer. Still, it was good and beautiful that Boaz wanted to save his kinsman's house and carry out his family name, even if he faced great damages to his wealth. Therefore, Boaz promised to redeem it. This symbolized the sacrifice of Christ to save sinners. Christ sacrificed his life to redeem the chosen people of God. The Lord also granted an imperishable inheritance of heaven to God's saved people. In that sense, like the Lord in his faith. Verses 11 to 12. Then the elders and all those at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. May you have standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah." When all the elders and people at the town gate saw Boaz make this promise, they said that they would be witnesses. Not only that, but they Boaz, because of his faith to redeem the kinsman's family. The nameless kinsman redeemer was shamed before people because he was afraid of economic loss. Unlike him, Boaz saved one family through his sacrifice. That is why he was blessed by the people. In verse 11, people blessed Ruth that she would be like Rachel and Leah, who together built up the house of Israel. Rachel and Leah were the wives of Jacob, and they were the mothers of the 12 tribes of Israel. They blessed Ruth that she would become like Rachel and Leah, who built up the house of Israel. Then her that she would have a standing in Ephrathah and be famous in Bethlehem. People then blessed Boaz that he would be famous and earn a reputation in Bethlehem and Ephrathah. In verse 12, they blessed them that their family would be like that of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah. Perez was the son of Tamar, who was born through Judah, the fourth son of Jacob. Perez was the seventh ancestor of Boaz. His family was prosperous. People blessed Boaz so that he would be prosperous as the family of Perez was. God blessed Boaz because Christ would come through his family line. The elders of the town did Boaz and Ruth to be as prosperous as Perez. They blessed Boaz because Christ would be born through the line of Boaz. Verses 13 to 17. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. Then he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a kinsman redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." He took, laid him in her lap, and cared for him. The woman living there said, "Naomi has a son." And they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. Boaz and Ruth formed a family after they were married. Boaz lay with Ruth, and she gave birth to a son by the blessing of God. The woman living there blessed the child and named him Obed. Usually, the father or a family member names a child. However, the woman living there named the child. This shows that Boaz and Ruth were complemented by the people living there. That is why their child was named Obed. Obed became grandfather of David. In verse 15, it says, "He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." The name Obed means a servant. Ruth served and supported Naomi. This was great comfort and encouragement to Naomi, who lived in sadness for a long time. Naomi became childless after her 2 sons died. Yet, through the faith and sacrificial devotion of Ruth, Naomi's family line was carried down. That is why the woman complimented your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons. Verses 17 to 22. This, then, is the family line of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram, Ram the father of Amminadab, Amminadab the father of Nahshon, Nahshon the father of Salmon, Salmon the father of Boaz, Boaz the father of Obed, Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David. The end of the book of Ruth records the family line of Perez. This shows that Obed, whom Ruth gave birth to, received blessings and became famous, just as the woman said when they blessed him. Obed's son was Jesse, and Jesse's son was David. Obed became the grandfather of David, and Jesus Christ, family line of David. Ruth was a foreign woman, but she was blessed to participate in the line of Christ. This teaches us the truth that Gentiles can be saved through their faith in Jesus, participate in the family line, and become a family of God. In Ephesians chapter 2, verse 19, it says that all believers of Jesus have become members of God's household. There are 3 main characters in the book of Ruth, and they are Naomi, Ruth, and Boaz. We must imitate their faith and walk the blessed path of faith. Thank you.